Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the winding backroads of history, there exists a story buried beneath the soil of Florida swamps and whispered in the rhythm of gullah prayers. A story not taught in schools, nor celebrated in mainstream Black History Month tributes. It is the tale of the Black Seminoles, a fierce, resilient people who refused to be broken by slavery, colonialism, or cultural erasure. Their story is one of liberation, survival, and something even more unexpected, a spiritual and ancestral link to the ancient Hebrews. In a world where origin stories are often rewritten by conquerors, the Black Seminoles stand as a testament to the truth that cannot be silenced forever. To understand the roots of the Black Seminoles, one must journey back to the 18th century, when Spanish Florida became a sanctuary for Africans escaping British and American plantations. These Africans, many of whom were already deeply spiritual, and some who were already practicing a form of Hebraic faith, fled southward, forging an alliance with the Seminole Nation, a confederation of indigenous tribes. Over time, their bonds deepened not only through shared resistance to slavery and settler expansion, but through the weaving together of African, indigenous, and ancient Hebraic customs. Among the earliest Maroon communities in the Americas, these Black fugitives carried more than just scars from slavery. They carried memories. Many descended from West African ethnic groups such as the Igbo, Yoruba, and Akan cultures with well-documented traces of Israelite customs. Scholars such as Dr. Yosef Benjo-Cannon and John G. Jackson have argued that elements of Mosaic law, circumcision, dietary restrictions, and Sabbath observance were practiced by various African tribes long before their forced transplantation into the Americas. These Hebraic customs were not always learned from Christian missionaries or Jewish settlers, but were ancestral remnants, passed down from generation to generation, carrying the soul as much as in Scripture. In colonial Florida, these Africans came into contact with the Seminoles, Creek-speaking indigenous peoples who had themselves adopted many displaced tribes. The Seminoles were not merely passive allies. They offered land, protection, and a system of kinship that allowed the Black fugitives to live freely. Over time, the two groups intermarried and fought side by side against common enemies. They lived in villages that were structurally distinct from typical slave plantations, and the Africans maintained their own leadership and culture. Among their rituals and traditions were ones unfamiliar to Anglo-Christian eyes. They lit candles on the eve of rest days, refrained from eating pork, and practiced naming conventions that echoed Hebraic roots. The fusion of African Hebrew traditions with native customs birthed a unique identity, the Black Seminoles. They were warriors, spiritualists, farmers, and freedom seekers. They took names like Abraham, Caesar, and Cudjoe, yet infused those names with the pride of free men. Some even believed they were the children of Israel, wandering in a strange land, looking for a promised land of their own. The idea was not far-fetched. In fact, during the Second Seminole War, 1835 to 1842, when U.S. forces tried to forcibly relocate the Seminoles and their Black allies, one U.S. Army officer noted that the Black Seminoles were fanatics who believe they are the true Israelites. In the words of historian William Katz, the Black Seminoles were not merely runaways, they were nation builders. They established towns, crafted treaties, and upheld military discipline. During the wars against the U.S. government, it was often the Black Seminole scouts who proved the most elusive and skilled fighters. Their leaders, such as John Horse, also known as Wancaballo, led daring campaigns to rescue enslaved kin, negotiate with colonial powers, and secure safe passage for their people. Following relentless U.S. military campaigns, many Black Seminoles were eventually forced westward along with the Native Seminoles. Some ended up in Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, but others refused to bow to American domination and fled further to Mexico. In the harsh desert north of the Rio Grande, they re-established freedom settlements and were granted land by the Mexican government in return for protecting the border from Comanche raids. Here, in the dusty villages of El Nacimiento, their legacy endured. Even today, their descendants, known as Mescogos, celebrate Juneteenth and maintain cultural customs that hint at their unique ancestral tapestry, including chants and ceremonial observances reminiscent of Hebraic roots. Meanwhile, in the southern United States, the memory of the Black Seminoles began to fade, intentionally erased by policies that categorized them either as Negroes or Indians, never acknowledging the depth of their syncretic identity. The U.S. government, particularly after emancipation, had no interest in preserving a narrative that might challenge the racial binaries of the time. Yet, oral traditions persisted. Gullah and Geechee elders, linguistically and culturally connected to the Black Seminoles, spoke of the old ways, where men prayed facing east, avoided pork, and followed laws written on hearts, not on paper. Modern scholarship has begun to re-examine these traditions with new eyes. Genetic studies show that some African Americans carry Middle Eastern DNA markers, particularly those with ancestry linked to Maroon and Seminole communities. Linguistic studies of the Gullah dialect, as well as songs and proverbs, contain curious parallels with West African Hebrew words. These findings do not suggest a direct lineage to ancient Israel, but they do point to a sustained cultural memory, one where African and Hebraic traditions coexisted, fused, and flourished even under the harshest conditions. Even the religious beliefs of the Black Seminoles bear evidence of this ancient connection. In both oral tradition and spiritual practices, one finds the reverence for a singular, powerful creator, one often called by names like Yah or Yahweh. Some communities abstained from shellfish, circumcised their sons, and recited psalm-like chants passed down from elders. These practices weren't always explained by Christianity or Islam, but seemed to rise from a deeper well, a cultural inheritance from West African Hebrews carried into the wilderness of Florida. Today, the descendants of the Black Seminoles continue to fight for recognition, not just for tribal inclusion or land rights, but for the truth of their story to be told. The U.S. government still refuses to recognize them as a distinct people, even as they maintain separate communities, histories, and ancestral memories. Their cultural resilience stands as a living archive, one that links Africa, America, and ancient Israel in a lineage that defies the colonial logic of categorization. In the end, the story of the Black Seminoles and their Hebrew roots is more than a historical curiosity. It is a revelation. It challenges the narratives imposed by colonizers and slave owners. It reminds us that African people did not arrive in chains as blank slates, but as bearers of ancient knowledge, culture, and spirituality. It reclaims the power of memory, showing that even in the wilderness of forced migration, the flame of identity can endure. The Black Seminoles were not just survivors. They were prophets, warriors, and priests in their own right, living out a modern-day exodus on American soil.